Thank you.
Tom. Thanks, Chair. So this is to Kirsten. So I understand you've been in post since 2015. How many different directors of children's services have there been whilst you've been there?
There have been 2 substantive post holders and there have been 2 interim DCSs. It's almost inevitable when a DCS resigns that you will have an interim in place for some time because of the length of time it takes to recruit a director of children's services.
So, I mean, we obviously had the Ofsted report in 2018, which was incredibly concerning. I imagine that building up to that, you probably had some concerns about where things could be heading. How, as the Chief Executive, in the time that you've been Chief Executive, which is about 7 years, how actively involved have you been in trying to turn a failing department around?
I've been incredibly active. As you know, I have statutory responsibilities. In addition, I am responsible for the performance of my organisation. Currently, I would estimate 2/3 of my time is spent on children's services, and that is about supporting the business as usual activity, the improvement activity, and the building of a new organisation, the Children's Trust. So I have sat on the improvement board throughout this period. I've worked with the improvement advisor. I've maintained relationships with the Department for Education and also the regulator, met regularly with the 4 statutory post holders. My wider organisation has marshalled support and money and other resources to support children's services. I, like Nick actually, I have visited children in different settings, whether they're looked after Children's Council or residential homes. I've met with foster carers. I've visited social work teams. I've been involved in specific cases which have been particularly complex and interagency, where there have been challenging decisions about placement. So I've been heavily engaged.
So over the time that you've been Chief Executive, you have been actively involved in the Children's Services work, in trying to make it work. And why do you think you've failed in turning that around?
Yeah, so I think quite a bit of this is covered in the Commissioner's report earlier this year, and it does reflect that both the leader and I have been very engaged and visible. It also reflects that we have been quite demanding because this isn't good enough, this is on our watch. Children are our first priority. We are the youngest place in the United Kingdom, 149,000 children under the age of 18. And the Commissioner went on to reflect that there were a number of issues that became apparent. The first was that the scale of inadequacy was perhaps not adequately reflected in the ILAC's judgment initially, and it took some time and under the interim DCS for that to become apparent. We did know, as you said, between 2017, when we actually had a very positive JTI inspection, that there had been rapid deterioration due to an increased turnover of staff, of experienced staff, going to more highly paid positions in authorities around us, which themselves had been inadequate. We were the last of the West Yorkshire authorities to go inadequate. Not understanding the scale of inadequacy. Recruiting a team, it took us 2 rounds to recruit our DCS. But all of the team came well referenced through competitive market processes, but they were stepping up and the scale and complexity of what they were taking on.
I think the issue that many people will have is that this tragedy, it didn't come out of nowhere. It frankly came at the back of years of a failing service. Would you have some sympathy for those? Clearly, what happened with Star was a tragedy of immense proportions, and which I imagine has caused huge upset and distress, obviously to the family and the friends, but probably actually to the whole area, who are being sad. Would you have some sympathy for their view that for your council to turn a leaf? Would you have some sympathy with their view that they might feel that it is impossible to do so under your leadership?
I have considered that, and I live in that community. I live actually not very far from where Star lived. I am deeply aware of the distress and anguish it has caused to Star's family, friends of Star's family who also made referrals, and the wider community. And I'm aware of that depth of community anguish, and I have also heard those views. As I said earlier, I've reflected very long and hard. I know the disruption that it has caused, the resignation of DCSs and the instability that that brings with it, and I have concluded that at this point in time, I take responsibility for staying in position and taking the challenges and being held to account in the way that you rightly are, and for putting it right.
But ultimately, this is what failure looks like. Ultimately, as a chief executive, the buck stops with you. As you say, you've been actively involved in the Children's Services Department. If accountability doesn't lie with you, where does it lie? Could I broaden my question out just to get a sense? Because maybe if I've missed it, I'm sorry, but has anyone actually lost their job because of these two tragedies?
Not in my authority, no.
A number of the people who were involved in this case have departed the local authority. They chose to do so. We have looked at the performance of all the others who remained and whether there are capability issues. We have made a couple of referrals, and we've also done learning reviews with those who were involved.
So just quickly to you, Nick. So some of those social workers that were intensely involved with that failure are still working at your authority?
So the social workers that were involved directly with Arthur, both of them are off work. One's had a breakdown, and then the other one we're trying to get back into work at the moment. We have changed some, obviously, our leadership, and you were aware of that as the committee. So yes, and like Kirsten and her team, day by day, we're going through all the learning and all the training and the retraining to try and get our team where they need to be.
I mean, we've had it. Various colleagues from this committee have gone into detail about just how perplexing it is that some of those mistakes were made in terms of the bruising, in terms of not picking up on the body language, in terms of coming to the conclusion that somehow Arthur was very safe and very happy. I mean, what explanations have they given to you for how they got it so wrong?
So we've done the immediate review, which as Tim's described. We went through that as soon as Arthur's death was notified. We went through every single stage. Again, you recognised as a committee the issue around those photographs and why we didn't have that review. And again, I have, with Tim and with my political leadership in the council, been through the chronology 3 times. Every single time, looking at why didn't we do this? Where was the deficit? Why didn't we do that? What would you need to do to change? We have gone through it forensically before Annie and the panel even arrived.
So, final point for me. So those, but I think it was two individuals who were most closely connected to the Arthur case. You would have confidence in them going back into work and supporting young people in your area?
With the right systems and the structures around them, I would.